What's up, it's Cairo. Welcome back to the channel. We are 4 days into March after season reset, and today we're going to take a look at the best of one standard ranked meta. As you can see right here, we have tier 1, and that consists of 3 decks according to untapped.gg for best of one. At the top, we have AZORIUS Soldiers, 62% win rate. Next, we have Mono White Soldiers, 60% win rate, and NAYA Humans is making a return. So today I'm going to take a look at the top 3 decks, talk about what you need to be expecting when you're facing these decks, and if you choose to run these decks, how to play them optimally. I do have experience with all 3 of these decks. They've been around for quite some time now, so we'll be able to take a look at the key cards and see what we need to know about these decks. So first, let's take a look at AZORIUS Soldiers. We'll start right at the bottom. First, you have your 2 1-drops. Your Recruitment Officer is your more aggressive of the 2. It's a 2-1, and it also has the ability for you to tap 1 plains and 3 colorless to look at the top 4 cards of your library and get a creature with mana value 3 or less from among them, put it into your hand, and the rest of the bottom of your library in a random order. The best creature that you probably want to get is going to be Brutal Cathar whenever your opponent plays a troublesome big creature that you are having trouble getting through in combat. Other good picks are going to be Myrel, Shield of Argive, which we'll explain here in a little bit, or Harbin if you have 5 soldiers ready to attack. So this is a very versatile card, it's a very aggressive card, and this should be your choice 1-drop. If you're playing against red and you sense that there's going to be some removal, you may think about playing your Frontliner first, just so you don't lose this aggressive thing, because the Frontliner can be unearthed from the graveyard. Speaking of the Frontliner, we have it here. It's 1 generic mana for an uncommon. It's a 1/1 soldier. When it attacks, another target creature you control gets +1/+1 till end of turn. And what I mentioned about it just a second ago is that it has unearth for 1 white mana, meaning that if you sense that your 1-drop is going to be removed, consider playing Yotian Frontliner first. That way you can still get some value from it. Maybe on turn 3 or 4, flash it back, attack with it. Or I'm sorry, unearth and attack with it, and give your other attacking creature +1/+1. Say you have a 3/3 and they have a 4/4, that might just make the difference of you getting through with that damage. Very, very powerful 2-drop here. This is a legendary creature. It's Harbin, Vanguard, Aviator, 1 white, 1 blue for a 3/2 human soldier. It's a flying 3/2, so already really good on rate in itself. When you attack with 5 or more soldiers, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain flying until end of turn. So if you have this in your hand, be thinking about on turn 2 and turn 3 how you can maximize your soldier count. Even if they're just tokens or little things, these can really sweep in, and Harbin can really end games. So when you have your soldiers, keep in mind that this is going to be one of your kill cards. If you're familiar with Winota at all, this is kind of like baby Winota. Takes all of your ground-based creatures that can't really get through, slam this down, and Harbin himself does not need to be an attacker. Alright, so if you have 5 soldiers, you put this down, even though it has summoning sickness, all your other soldiers, as long as you have 5 of them, will get +1/+1 and gain flying until end of turn, go right over the top and end games. Resolute Reinforcements. 2 mana, uncommon, 1/1 with flash, and when it enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. So this is best used on the opponent's end step. Flash this in, and especially paired with your Valiant Veteran, which we'll get into in just a second. But also, if you're playing against blue, don't think that you have to flash this in. So if they only have 1 mana and it's your turn 2, go ahead and get it down so that way they can't counter it. Instead of waiting for them to put another mana down, flash it in and then counter it. So if you're playing against blue, just throw down the Resolute Reinforcements so that way they can't counter it. Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. Very, very good card. Has been since its release in Crimson Vow. Good against decks that don't play a lot of creatures and play sweepers and things like that. 1 white, 1 generic for a 2/1 legendary creature. First strike, non-creature spells cost 1 generic more to cast. So if you can get this down on turn 2, your opponent goes turn 3 to cast their Fable the Mirror Breaker on their curve to get that value. Suddenly it costs 4. Their Depopulate, their Board Wipe costs 5. Their Farewell costs 7. So Thalia, if you're facing a deck that has red, blue, or black as their turn 1 or turn 2 drop, get Thalia down as soon as possible to start taxing those spells, and even sometimes taxing that cheap removal, knowing that Thalia or your other creature will be killed, making them pay 3 for a go for the throat instead of 2 can give you the tempo that you need to get through. Valiant Veteran, 2-drop, 2/2 core soldier. Other soldiers you control get +1/+1, and you get some graveyard value as long as this thing isn't exiled. You can tap double white and 3 generic to exile it from your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on each soldier that you control. Now keep in mind that this does not say activate only as a sorcery, so you can do this after you declare attackers, before blocks, or after they choose their blockers. If they forget about it, you can blow them out in combat there. You can also do this at instant speed on their turn if you want to. Brutal Cathar, 3-drop, 2/2 human soldier werewolf. When it comes into the battlefield or it transforms back into Brutal Cathar, exile target creature an opponent controls until this creature leaves the battlefield, and has daybound. So if it's not anything, it comes in and it's day. Comes in, exiles another creature until it leaves the battlefield. If an opponent or a player does not cast at least one spell during their turn, it flips to Moonrage Brute, which is a 3/3 first strike, and it has a ward. To even target it, you have to pay 3 life. Then if you cast 2 spells, it can flip back to day, and it's possible for you to exile multiple things with this card. So this card is a little bit scary to use, especially when you have 2 or 3 things underneath of it. It's fantastic value, but make sure that you're doing it at the right time. Don't exile something that has a massive enter the battlefield bonus. Something like, I don't know, off the top of my head, something like Atraxa, right? Where it enters the battlefield, gains tons of value. You exile it with a Brutal Cathar. They kill the Cathar. It comes back in, gains them that value again. Very good to exile tokens with Brutal Cathar because they don't come back when they kill the Brutal Cathar. So be aware of the enter the battlefield abilities of things that you are exiling with Brutal Cathar. Siege Veteran, 3 mana. 2/2 human soldier. Beginning of combat, you can put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature you control. Does not have to be a soldier. When another non-token soldier you control dies, create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. So a lot of the times, this is very good on curve on turn 3, making your things attack, getting them bigger turn after turn. But some of the value on this is if you sense that there's going to be a board wipe coming. Your opponent's playing AZORIUS control, mono white control, something like that. And it's not an exile-based board wipe. Say it's a depopulate. You have a lot of creatures down, so you have 2 recruitment officers, you have a Harbin out, and you have to choose between Skystrike Officer or Veteran. Get Veteran on the field. The reason why is for that second clause. When another non-token soldier you control dies, create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. That means whenever they wipe the entire board, it doesn't trigger only once. So for each non-token soldier you have, you create a 1/1 token, then you're able to go in and keep that pressure going next turn. Especially if you have a Valiant Veteran in hand, you make 3 1/1 tokens, drop the Veteran, boom, you're already back to 6 damage. Skystrike Officer is a very, very good card. It's 3 mana. This is our blue soldier, our only pure blue soldier here. It's a 2/3 flyer. When it attacks, you create a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens, and you can tap 3 untapped soldiers you control to draw a card. Notice this also does not say that you can only do it as a sorcery. So if you have Skystrike Officer out and you have another soldier or 2, you can attack with the officer, create that 1/1 soldier, which is then untapped, and then keep those up to block. And at the end step on their turn, you can tap 3 untapped soldiers you control and draw a card. So it's nice to keep all your stuff up, and then at the end, if they don't do anything, it kind of acts like a control deck and giving you more card advantage and more things to do by just tapping your things before your turn comes and you untap. Also keep in mind that it doesn't say you can only tap 3. If you have 6, you can activate this ability twice and draw 2 cards. Be careful with this though whenever they play Sheoldred, because every time that you draw a card, you're going to be losing some life. So sometimes it's helpful if they play a Sheoldred while it's waiting to resolve. Go ahead and draw your card then, so you don't take that damage. Myrel, Shield of Argive. 1 white, 3 generic for a 3/4 legendary creature human soldier. During your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments, which is huge. It turns off all of their instant speed removal, which is very, very nice and provides you a little bit of security. You can attack in knowing that they can't do combat tricks and things like that. When Myrel, Shield of Argive attacks, create X 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens, where X is a number of soldiers that you control. So, if you have a turn where you have 4, 5, 6 mana and you're wanting to play multiple things and you have Myrel on the field, pre-combat, if you're getting ready to attack with Myrel, make sure that you're playing all of your creatures pre-combat. So that way you get the maximum amount of tokens from Myrel. We have 3 dual lands here, a dual land here with this particular build. This is the build on Untapped. I would probably run more duals than this, and it's not including... Okay, so we have Fortified Beachhead over here. Alright, so yeah, Eiganjo, Seat of the Empire, and Otawara, Soaring City are the 2 legendary channel lands from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. I would recommend running 1 of each of those. Probably not more than 1, because you don't want to get into a situation where you have 2 legendary lands and you're forced to use 1 as a channel. One thing about Eiganjo, Seat of the Empire that a lot of people miss is you can channel this out for 3 mana. It costs 1 less for each legendary creature you control, and we do have 3 legendary creatures in this deck, so it could possibly cost just 1 plains. But the thing a lot of people miss is it does 4 damage to a blocking creature as well. So one of the ways that you can kind of bluff this is if your opponent casts like a Sheoldred, which is a 4/5, you can go in and swing with this in your hand, do it quickly, so that way they don't get a sense that you have it, and just swing in with all of your 1/1 tokens. They block 1, you Eiganjo take that rest of that 4 damage, killing Sheoldred. That works quite often, especially when you attack with a lot of things really quickly and you kind of bluff it. You just like throw things, and they'll block 1, and you can kill the Sheoldred and get out of it there. Fortified Beachhead is another dual land, and this is really strange. The Brothers War, they made a dual land only for soldiers. When it enters the battlefield, you can reveal a soldier card from your hand, and it enters tapped unless you reveal the soldier or you control a soldier. So if you play Fortified Beachhead and you have a Recruitment Officer on turn 1, you play this on turn 2, it's going to prompt you, it's going to say reveal a soldier, and you don't have to. So keep that in mind. If you control a soldier already, don't reveal another card from your hand just because it prompts you. It will come in untapped if you already control a soldier. And this also has a nice little ability on it. 5 generic mana, tap it, soldiers you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. A lot of times people will miss this. They'll confuse this with another Deserted Beach or Adarkar Wastes or something like that, opponents. And you can do this during combat. So if they set up blocks, you can automatically make all your stuff +1/+1 and make it unfavorable for them. So that kind of wraps up AZORIUS Soldiers. We're going to move on to the next deck. If you have any questions about AZORIUS Soldiers, post a comment below this video. There are also multiple videos on the channel if you want to see some gameplay with this deck. Next up, we have Mono White Soldiers. I'm not going to go over every card that I did with the AZORIUS Soldiers again, but I'm going to show you the key differences here and how it kind of operates a little bit differently. So you'll notice at the bottom, we have a Recruitment Officer and Yotian Frontliner again, but we also have Lay Down Arms because we have a mono white mana base that cares about the number of planes that we control, and we have a ton of basic lands in here. So it's 1 white, exile target creature with mana value less than or equal to the number of planes you control. Its controller gains 3 life. And a lot of times that 3 life doesn't matter. You just need to get that thing the hell out of the way so you can just keep attacking in. Good things for this are Sheoldred, anything with a death trigger, you can exile it. Things with Unearth or Flashback, get rid of them. They're permanently gone. This is at sorcery speed though, so remember that Lay Down Arms can only be done on your turn. You can't do this at instant speed, so plan accordingly. Another different card we have here is Guardian of New Benalia. 1 white, 1 generic for a 2/2 human soldier. This is from Dominaria United. This has Enlist. So as this creature attacks, you may tap a non-attacking creature you control without summoning sickness, and when you do, add its power to this creature's until the end of turn. And whenever Guardian of New Benalia enlists a creature, you get to scry 2, which is actually a big deal. It's not card draw, but it does line up your future draws, so that way you can maximize your value and your draws to deal with the board state that's there. You can also discard a card, and Guardian of New Benalia gains indestructible until end of turn. and you can tap it. So be enlisting whenever you can. The cool thing about Guardian of Nubenalia is that whenever your opponent plays like a 4-4 or 5-5, you can still pretty much attack with Guardian of Nubenalia throughout the game as long as you have a few other creatures to enlist. Because it'll be like a 4-2 or a 5-2 or something like that. And then if you're drawing into lands that you don't need, discard them, give this indestructible till end of turn, and you do have to tap it. The next thing we have here is, these are all the same other than this deck. Usually, this build only has one, but a lot of times this deck will run 2 Mishra's Foundries. So this is a rare land. It's one of the only man lands in the standard meta right now. Tap 2 generic mana, it becomes a 2/2 Assembly Worker artifact creature until end of turn, and it's still a land, so you can get in for 2 damage there. Tap 1 and tap it. Target attacking Assembly Worker gets +2/+2 till end of turn. There are no other Assembly Workers in this deck other than Mishra's Foundry. So what I have had happen before, which has been pretty sneaky, is if you have a Mishra's Foundry attacking and you have one that's back, so you have 2 because they're not legendary, you can activate one to buff the other. So you can potentially have a Mishra's Foundry at 4/4, and you can do this at instant speed too. So if they don't notice it, they line up a block with a 3/3, take your other Mishra's Foundry, and buff the one that's attacking since it is an Assembly Worker. That wraps up Mono White Soldiers. If you have a question about that, leave it below, and there's also a Mono White video from when the Brothers War was released with this basically almost the same build except for lay down arms on the channel. And the third and final deck we're talking about today is NAYA Humans, which is making a comeback. They're not all humans, but most of them are. So at the bottom we have Hopeful Initiate. This was an all-star in Mono White and Crimson Vow. It's a 1/2 with Training, meaning that when it attacks with another creature with greater power, it gets a +1/+1 counter. This thing is also good in the mid-game with destroying artifacts and enchantments like, Fable the Mirror Breaker, Reflection of Kiki Jiki, Reckoner Bankbuster, all those troublesome enchantments that are really powerful that have come out over the course of the last few sets. You can do this by tapping 1 white mana and 2 generic and removing 2 counters from among creatures you control. Doesn't have to be the Hopeful Initiate. And you can do this at instant speed. So say you have attack in with a bunch of things and your opponent blocks, you can remove 2 counters from your Initiate if you have the 3 mana, get rid of their Wedding Announcement, which is giving all their creatures +1/+1, and then blow them out there. Very good card. Skrelv Defector Might is new from Phyrexia. All will be 1. It's a 1 white. It has Toxic 1, which we don't really care about. It's a 1/1. It can't block. It has white Phyrexian mana, so either 2 life or 1 white mana. Tap it, choose a color. Another target creature you control gains Toxic 1 and Hexproof from that color till end of turn, and it can't be blocked by creatures of that color this turn. So during the early game, if you don't need the aggro, again, this toxic doesn't matter to us, and this 1 damage doesn't really matter. This thing has to tap to be able to give your other creatures protection and hexproof from that color. So I would avoid attacking with Skrelv. You play a turn 1 Skrelv, turn 2 you have like a Guardian or a Thalia or something like that. Just attack with the Thalia, leave the Skrelv untapped, so that way you can always protect something from removal. That just kind of there to protect all of your other things. We don't care about the 1/1 damage. Later in the game, though, say your opponent doesn't have many cards and you have a big, beefy, from Halana and Elena, a big 5/5 or something, you can tap this guy, give it protection from a certain color, and get that damage in because it can't be blocked. Guardian of Nubenalia we went over. Melira the Living Cure, this is 1 white, 1 green, a 3/3. If you get 1 or more poison counters, instead you get 1, and you can't get additional poison counters this turn. So incidentally, really good against toxic decks. But the thing that we're really concerned about is the Exile Melira the Living Cure. Choose another target creature or artifact. When it's put in the graveyard this turn, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. So sacrifices herself to bring one of your things back. And it doesn't just stay on the field, so it goes in the graveyard and then it comes back into play. So this is maximized by things that come back into play and haven't entered the battlefield effect, which we'll see in just a second. We got Thalia, we have Valorous Stance, 2 mana. Target creature gains indestructible till end of turn, protects one of your big threats, or also destroy target creature with toughness 4 or greater. This card is very good in the meta in general right now, just because of Sheoldred and the threats that you care about that will stop you. Usually you don't care about them if they're 2 or 3 drops, right? This deck only really cares about the big creatures because we can kind of brawl through everything else. So Valorous Stance is very good at that, and that's instant speed. Adeline, one of the best 3-drops still from Midnight Hunt. 3 mana, star 4 vigilance. Power equal the number of creatures you control. It also spawns a 1/1 white human creature token that's tapped and attacking when it attacks, and it has vigilance, so it's just a super, super good card. Anointed Peacekeeper, 1 white, 2 generic for a human cleric, a 3/3 vigilance. When it comes in, look at the opponent's hand, then choose any card name. Spells your opponent's cast with a chosen name cost 2 more to cast, and activated abilities of sources with a chosen name cost 2 more to activate unless they're mana abilities. So that last little line of text is very good at targeting planeswalkers because every loyalty ability makes them pay mana. Very good targeting a board wipe in their hand, but one thing to keep in mind with Anointed Peacekeeper is if you play this and you look at their hand and you go, I don't really care about taxing any of those cards. You don't have to choose a card that's just in their hand. You can choose any card name. So say you're playing against a combo deck and you know that they're getting ready to cast Invoke Justice to get a Traxa back or whatever. You can name Invoke Justice even if they don't have it in their hand. So keep that in mind. Also, when this goes away, the tax ends, and then when it comes back, you can choose something else new to tax. So Malira Living Cure, if this happens to get killed and then it comes back, you can tax something else. Brutal Cathar we went over. Helana and Elena Partners. This is probably one of the best Gruul cards in the meta right now. It's 4 mana. It's a rare. It's a 2/3 first strike with reach, and you'd be surprised how often that reach matters. Especially against mono red where they're beating you down with Phoenix Chicks. Maybe they have a counter on it from Kumano faces Kakuzan, something like that. So being able to block the flyers is very good. When it comes in, at the beginning of combat, put X +1/+1 counters on another target creature you control, where X is Helana and Elena's power. That creature gains haste until end of turn, and that last line is a biggie. So if you have Helana and Elena out, you can play another creature, give it haste, and give it +1/+1 counters. So if the choice is between the creature that you just put out and a creature that you already had out, remember that it also does give haste. Sigarda, Champion of Light, double white, 1 green, 1 generic for a 4/4 flying trample. Humans you control get +1/+1, which is everything in this deck except for Skrelv, Defector Might. Even Brutal Cathar, it will not get it when it's a Moonrage Brute because it's only a werewolf, but it will get it on the top side. Coven. When Sigarda attacks, if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, look at the top 5 cards of your library, reveal a human creature card, and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. That's pretty self-explanatory. Sigarda is very good. Malira the Living Cure and Skrelv is kind of what I was talking about for targets to protect. That would be Sigarda and Helana and Elena, because the longer these are on the field, sacrifice almost anything to protect these, because they just destroy the opponent. Lots of duels in here, and we do have Secluded Courtyard naming Human, which will give you access to any color of mana to cast anything in this deck other than Valorous Stance and Skrelv. Plaza of Heroes, we do have this for colorless mana and any colored mana to cast a legendary spell, of which there are many in here. And then 3, and exile it. Target legendary creature gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. And the things that we really care about protecting are legendary anyway, so Sigarda and Helana and Elena. I wouldn't really mess with any other lands here because your mana base is already kind of tight, being a 3-color aggro deck. They do have Eiganjo, Seat of the Empire in here, which is, yeah, you definitely want that, as I've explained before. So this is NAYA Humans. Thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you gained some knowledge off this, or hope this, at least if you knew kind of about these and you just need a little bit of a refresher or something like that, sometimes it's good to go over these deck lists. And I was kind of surprised to see NAYA Humans popping up with such a high win rate, but looking at it more, because I think the last time I looked at it was at Crimson Vow. Yeah, it's still pretty viable. There's a lot of power in this deck. So thanks for watching. Thanks for hitting that thumbs up. It's free. It supports the channel. Thanks for subscribing, and I will see you next time.